Hi everybody, I hope that you're all doing well. So today I am back to talk about a few books that I am quite keen to read in 2021. But firstly, of course, you can already see all the sequins on this jumper sparkling already. It is Vlogmas, so therefore I must show you the Christmas jumper that I'm wearing. So today's number comes courtesy of my mother's wardrobe once again, and it's got loads of gorgeous little baubles on it. Or is this meant to be? No, it's meant to be Christmas lights. Twinkly twinkly Christmas lights. And I quite like this one. I like how it dazzles. I may have to keep it like down here just in case anybody's sensitive to light. I do hope that's not too distracting. This is what happens when you film at night and you have to be completely reliant on your overhead lights. Okay, well if that's really distracting, I'm really sorry. But yes, I am here to run through a little TBR video of backlist books that I am really keen to read in 2021. Now you will have seen already that I did an anticipated releases video, which is for all of the books that are being published in 2021, at least from January through to June. I'm also going to be doing a video for 2021 which is talking about my bookish goals for this year. But no, this is slightly different. This is for books that are already out, that are in the backlist, that I'm just really keen to get to. Oh gosh, this is too distracting. This is the first time I've had to actually tone down one of my jumpers. Ugh. Like that. I'm going to have to like do this like a toga so it doesn't distract people. Because at this point it's actually distracting me. Ugh. Oh, I love this jumper, but it might actually be too much. I've literally just tied a cardigan around so that it's not distracting. This is such a look. I also want to point out that this is definitely an in the moment TBR. These are the books that are currently like top priority of things that I would love to buy. I have done previous like seasonal TBRs, like my autumn TBR, and then looked back on them a few months later and being like, well, yeah, I do want to read that, but I didn't get anywhere close to buying that, let alone reading it. So I have a feeling that a few months from now, I'm going to look at this list and be like, oh, yeah, that book. But regardless, you know, I think it's always fun to see where you are at in your reading mood. So without much further ado, here are a few books that I'm really keen to read in 2021. I suppose this could also double as like my Christmas wish list. First up, a book that I'm really shocked I haven't picked up already is Pandora's Jar, Women in the Greek Myths by Natalie Haynes. I have previously read Natalie Haynes's fiction book, which is 1,000 Ships, which is a retelling of the Trojan War, but from the perspective of all of the women who were affected. I thought it was such a brilliant book, so I was so excited to see that she had kind of a non-fiction version out. The Greek myths are among the world's most important cultural building blocks, and they have been retold many times, but rarely do they focus on the remarkable women at the heart of these ancient stories. Stories of gods and monsters are the mainstay of epic poetry and Greek tragedy, from Homer to Aeschylus, Sophocles and Euripides, from the Trojan War to Jason and the Argonauts. And still today, a wealth of novels, plays and films draw their inspiration from stories first told almost 3,000 years ago. But modern tellers of Greek myth have usually been men, and have routinely shown little interest in telling women's stories. And when they do, those women are often painted as monstrous, vengeful, or just plain evil. But Pandora, the first woman, who, according to legend, unloosed chaos upon the world, was not a villain. And even Medea and Phaedra have more nuanced stories than generations of retellings might indicate. Now in Pandora's Jar, Women in the Greek Myths, Natalie Haynes, broadcaster, writer, and passionate classicist, redresses this imbalance. Taking Pandora and her jar, the box came later, as the starting point, she puts women in the Greek myths on equal footing with the menfolk. After millennia of stories telling of gods and men, be they Zeus or Agamemnon, Paris or Odysseus, Oedipus or Jason, the voices that sing from these pages are those of Hera, Athena, Artemis, and of Clytemnestra, Jocasta, Eurydice and Penelope. Oh, I'm so excited to read this book. I've also been listening to quite a lot of podcasts about this book where Natalie Haynes has been like the guest star, and I just love hearing her discuss Greek myths. Next up is The White Ship by Charles Spencer. This book came out in 2020 and has been getting quite a lot of buzz because it is the 900th anniversary of the White Ship disaster. And if you know anything about the White Ship disaster, you can already tell why it is that I am so interested in it. Because the White Ship disaster was really what propelled one of my favourite historical figures, Empress Matilda, into the spotlight. Because Empress Matilda's brother was actually a victim of the White Ship disaster, and it was his death that ended up meaning that Matilda was next in line to the throne. That was until Stephen had other ideas. King Henry I was sailing for England in triumph after 4 years of fighting the French. Congregating with the king at the port of Barfleur on that freezing November night was the cream of Anglo-Norman society, 3 of his children, including the only legitimate male heir to the throne, as well as the flower of the aristocracy, famous knights and mighty courtiers. By 1120, Henry was perhaps the most formidable ruler in Europe, with an enviable record on the battlefield, immense lands and wealth, and an unprecedented authority in his kingdoms. Everything he had worked so hard for was finally achieved, and he was ready to hand it on to his beloved son and heir, William Atheling. Henry I and his retinue set out first. The white ship, considered the fastest afloat, would follow, carrying the young prince. Spoilt and arrogant, William had plied his comrades and crew with drink from the moment he stepped on board. It was the middle of the night when the drunken helmsman rammed the ship into rocks. There would only be one survivor from the gilded roll call of passengers. Written to commemorate the 900th anniversary of the shipwreck, Charles Spencer evokes the harsh and brutal story of the Normans from conquest to anarchy. With their heir dead, a civil war of untold violence erupted, a Game of Thrones which saw families turned in on each other, with English and Norman barons, rebellious Welsh princes and the Scottish king all playing for a part in a bloody desperate scrum for power. I mean, they've not mentioned Empress Matilda by name, but you know, she's coming, she's coming. Next up is Black and British, A Forgotten History by David Olusoga. This is a book that has been on my list for so long, and I really want to prioritise it in 2021, especially considering that there has been so much buzz around this book recently, and also a new children's adaptation of it. Adaptation? Iteration? What am I saying? In this vital re-examination of a shared history, historian and broadcaster David Olusoga tells the rich and revealing story of the long relationship between the British Isles and the people of Africa and the Caribbean. Drawing on new genealogical research, original records and expert testimony, Black and British reaches back to Roman Britain, the medieval imagination, Elizabethan blackamoors and the global slave trading empire. It shows that the great industrial boom of the 19th century was built on American slavery, and that Black Britons fought at Trafalgar and in the trenches of both world wars. Black British history is woven into the cultural and economic histories of the nation. It is not a singular history, but one that belongs to us all. Unflinching, confronting taboos and revealing hitherto unknown scandals, Olusoga describes how the lives of Black and white Britons has been entwined for centuries. I actually remember the first time I came across Black and British. I was doing work experience at Icon Books, and one of the managers there was actually reading this, and he was raving about how good it was. That is how long this book has been on my radar, and I still haven't picked it up. So 2020 really does need to be the year, because I want to know. I don't know if anybody else gets this, where you know a book is going to be fantastic so you end up putting it off. This is me with this book. Next up, slightly different territory, is Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell. So you'll know that this year I reread North and South, and I read for the first time Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell, and thoroughly enjoyed the process of reading both of them. Definitely new firm favourites. I did have big plans in Victober to just keep pedaling through different Elizabeth Gaskell books, and Cranford was going to be my next pick. However, my reading just dropped off at the end of the year, so I haven't been able to make the progress that I would like to with Elizabeth Gaskell, but this is definitely the book that I want to go to next. Cranford depicts the lives and preoccupations of the inhabitants of a small village, their petty snobberies, their appetite for gossip, and loyal support for each other in times of need. This is a community that runs on cooperation and gossip, at the very heart of which are the daughters of the former rector, Miss Deborah Jenkins, and her sister, Miss Mattie. But domestic peace is constantly threatened in the form of financial disaster, imagined burglaries, tragic accidents, and the reappearance of long-lost relatives. To Lady Glanmire, who shocks everybody by marrying the Doctor. When men do appear, such as modern Captain Brown or Mattie Suter from the past, they bring disruption and excitement to the everyday life of Cranford. I think what I love about Elizabeth Gaskell's writing is that her characters just feel so real. And I mean, if you've been watching my videos for any length of time, you know that characters and character development and relationships, those are what I prize most in books. So I'm so glad that I have rediscovered Elizabeth Gaskell this year, and she's become one of my favourite writers. Next up, another 2020 release that I saw so many people buzzing about was Dear Reader, The Comfort and Joy of Books by Cathy Rentzenbrink. We know that I'm a big fan of a book about books, so this is definitely like hitting the spot there for me. For as long as she can remember, Cathy Rentzenbrink has lost and found herself in stories. Growing up, she was rarely seen without her nose in a book, and read in secret long after lights out. When tragedy struck, books kept her afloat. Eventually, they lit the way to a new path, first as a bookseller, then as a writer. No matter what the future holds, reading will always help. Next up, a 2021 goal that I have been quite keen to try and fulfill is to read more short stories. I am very aware that my short story consumption is very low, and so I want to expand my horizons a little bit. But when I was kind of researching different short story collections, I did come across That Glimpse of Truth, The 100 Finest Short Stories Ever Written. I thought this was going to be a really good way of kind of getting a taster of short stories, and especially different genres and different styles. I feel like my big worry of short stories is that a lot of the ones that I often see recommended are usually kind of like on the magical realism kind of side, which is not necessarily my favourite thing to read. And I kind of like this. It's kind of like a buffet of different short stories, and I can kind of focus in on the ones that I love. And it says here it features an all-star cast of authors including Kate Atkinson, Julian Barnes, Angela Carter, Anton Chekhov, Charles Dickens, Roald Dahl, Penelope Fitzgerald, Colm Tobin, so many many people. So definitely I feel like this should be the book to get me started with short stories. Next up, hot off of reading Book Love by Debbie Tung, I really want to read her next illustrated comic book, which is Quiet Girl in a Noisy World, an Introvert Story. So I don't know if you can tell, because you know I'm such a social butterfly, obviously, that I am definitely an introvert. That is definitely where my energy lies. I do like socializing, I like meeting up with my friends, but I like to meet in smaller numbers, and I definitely value my alone time. And I just feel like every single time I've looked at like little excerpts of Quiet Girl in a Noisy World, it sounds so much like me. So since I adored Book Love so much, I feel like I need to get to Debbie Tung's next book. She just has the cutest, most relatable illustrations, so I'm sure I will eat this up. Next up is a book that is a little bit off-piece for me, and it is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I have never read any V.E. Schwab before, it just never seemed like my kind of writing. However, I recently watched a wrap-up by Jennifer Brooks, and she described this book, and it sounded like just kind of the bridge between YA and my kind of reading that I like. It just seemed like the kind of book that would bridge the gap between my interests. And I've seen so many recommendations from booktubers who I always trust the reviews of, saying how great this book is. And people, especially who don't typically read V.E. Schwab, saying how fantastic this book is. I feel like I want to be really, really clear. I'm not trying to badmouth YA or V.E. Schwab. It's just that what she writes isn't usually my typical genre. When Addie LaRue makes a pact with the devil, she trades her soul for immortality. But there's always a price. The devil takes away her place in the world, cursing her to be forgotten by everyone. Addie flees her tiny home in 18th century France, beginning a journey that takes her across the world, learning to live a life where no one remembers her, and everything she owns is lost and broken. Existing only as a muse for artists throughout history, she learns to fall in love anew every single day. Her only companion on this journey is her dark devil with hypnotic green eyes, who visits her each year on the anniversary of their deal. Alone in the world, Addie has no choice but to confront him, to understand him, maybe to beat him. Until one day in a second-hand bookshop in Manhattan, Addie meets someone who remembers her, suddenly thrust back into a real normal life. Addie realises she can't escape her fate forever. I think it's definitely like the historical aspect and the slight kind of time travel-y aspect of it. It reminds me a lot of How to Stop Time by Matt Haig, as well as The Outcasts of Time by Ian Mortimer. Maybe mixed in with like a little pinch of Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. It seems like it does have that little bit of glamour, but I could be completely wrong on that. But those were all books that I really, really loved. So if it is anything like those, I'm sure I will enjoy it. Then going back to history, we have The Light Ages, A Medieval Journey of Discovery by Seb Falk. So this book is basically all about science during the medieval period, and the title The Light Ages is playing on the commonly used term, and one that I have frequently gone on rants with my fellow historians, which is the Dark Ages. This is a term that lots of people use to describe the medieval period, and I hate it, especially when people use it in comparison to the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution. And I hate it because of the connotations. This general idea that people prior to the 17th and 18th century were just kind of stupid. I also feel like I see a lot of people equating religion to being anti-learning and anti-knowledge, which is just not true. The Dark Ages, where everything was gloomy and everybody was uneducated. Just this general idea that there was no scientific advancement during the medieval period. I hate it so much. And from what I do understand, the term the Dark Ages was never meant to refer to the amount of learning that was going on within this period, but purely because there is a dark age where we do not have much evidence for the period. It is dark because there is not a lot there, not because people were stupid. I just hate this general idea that a lot of people seem to have that, you know, science just suddenly miraculously erupted in the 18th century and was never there before then. And then suddenly everybody was enlightened. Nobody was stupid anymore. I'm just like, it's so much more complicated than that. And also, can we just stop infantilizing people of the past? Anyway, let's just see what the description of the book is. The Middle Ages were a time of wonder. They gave us the first universities, the first eyeglasses, and the first mechanical clocks as medieval thinkers sought to understand the world around them, from the passing of the season to the stars in the sky. In this book, we walk the path of medieval science with a real-life guide, a 14th century monk named John of Westwick, inventor, astrologer, and crusader, who was educated in England's grandest monastery and exiled to a clifftop priory. Following the traces of his life, we learn to see the natural world through Brother John's eyes, navigating by the stars, multiplying Roman numerals, curing disease, and telling the time with an astrolabe. Astrolabe? Astrolabe. We travel the length and breadth of England from St Albans to Tynemouth and venture far beyond the shores of Britain. On our way, we encounter a remarkable cast of characters: the clock-building English abbot with leprosy, the French craftsman turned spy, and the Persian polymath who founded the world's most advanced observatory. The enthralling story of the struggles and successes of an ordinary man in an extraordinary time, The Light Ages conjures up a vivid picture of the medieval world as we have never seen it before. So you may have noticed that was 9 books and not 10, and the reason for that is because all of the books that I've previously mentioned are books that I don't own. And I feel like maybe, just maybe, I should pick a book that I already own for this TBR rather than just spending all of my money, or like tempting myself to spend money. So you know what, let's just dream big. I know that I have planned to do my Les Mis read along with Kieran at the beginning of this year, but that doesn't mean that we can't squeeze in some other chunkers in that time. Well, maybe not right at the beginning of the year, but you know, later on. So the biggest book on my TBR is War and Peace! Woo! And this is also the book that has been on my TBR the longest, so I feel like 2021, I should try to get through this. And it was also a birthday present, so I would feel really, really bad if I went too long without having read this. So, you know, we maybe won't be doing a read along of this, but keep it in mind, like, hold me accountable. I'm gonna so regret saying that. Okay, we're gonna take off the cardigan now, so if you don't want to like have light in your eyes, like click off now. Okay, so those are the top 10 books that at the moment I am most keen to read in 2021. This of course is not an exhaustive list, and like I say, there are some 2021 releases that I'm really excited about, linked down below for that video. I also have thoughts about different goals that I would like to set for my reading in 2021, which may or may not conflict with this list. Do let me know if you have read any of these books, and just generally let me know about any books that you were keen to read in 2021. I would love to hear from you. I hope you are having a fantastic, fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.